swimming in the sun. And they're thinking I'm the only one.
Hey, hello again. I'm out at the boat haven in Port Townsend, working marina and ship repair yard. It's open to the public, which is really cool for artists like me. We can come in and paint on site as long as we're out of the way and we don't interrupt any repairs. I haven't explored around Port Townsend much. Cool little town, really vibrant waterfront, touristy area. I was just driving around this yard a little bit, and this Susan H. old boat in terrible disrepair really called out to me. Beautiful textures and colors, and the shape of the boat is really interesting. That would be fun to paint. Yeah, it looks like it's out of Port Townsend. So that would be fun. But I also think this old ship is really interesting. This would be fun to paint as well. It's partially uncovered. It's got some old, ripped, shredded tarps that are coming loose. So it'd be kind of fun to paint those tarps as well. Keep the surroundings really abstract. Lots of texture in this boat as well. I can't see any kind of name on it. I don't know what it's called. I could paint from here, which would be pretty consistent light for a while. Partially backlit. Or I could paint from here. I think I like this view. The sun should stay pretty consistent on this side of the boat for a while. So I'm going to take a couple pictures, play with the composition on my iPhone, see if I like a landscape or a portrait better, decide on what size panel I want to use, and then paint here for a couple hours. As always, thanks so much for joining me. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. I'm going with an 11 by 14 inch panel. This is a gesso board, just store-bought. I didn't gesso it myself, I just bought it. So it has a really smooth texture, great for drawing. I'm going to try that for this. I got a good deal on some of them, and I've used them before when I want a detailed drawing, and they work really well. That super smooth texture, super smooth surface. I think I'll go with a burnt sienna wash this time, since so much in the scene I think would contrast well with burnt sienna, and the bottom of the boat, the bottom half of the boat, has really warm, rotted wood. I think that burnt sienna will show up nicely if I leave some of that exposed. Now in this painting, I'm going to try to paint thin. I've been really admiring paintings lately that leave a lot of the underpainting showing, just use thin, light brushwork. I tend to put the paint on thick, and I'd like to thin my painting down just a bit. So I'm going to consciously try to do that. So I'll do a burnt sienna wash with some turpentine, and then I'll go in with some burnt umber and a few other colors depending on what I'm outlining, and just do the drawing. The drawing is really important on this. If I get the perspective wrong, the foreshortening wrong, it's just not going to be that impressive. I'll decide later if I want to leave some of this stuff in the foreground, these props that they use to hold the ship up. That might be kind of a neat chaotic element, colorful element in the foreground. or I might just leave the foreground pretty abstract. I think I'm going to leave the foreground and the background mostly abstract. It's really bright out here, so I'll be painting with my sunglasses on. Trying to paint realistically, drawing is so important. So, what are my tips for drawing? Well, practice is the main thing. Practice as often as you can. And the way to practice more is to enjoy it. So draw things that you enjoy. Don't draw things that frustrate you. So if you're trying to draw a house and you just can't get the perspective right, you can try using the tricks of perspective, vanishing points and whatnot, or you can just trace and then draw the detail freehand. Make it fun and draw. Draw as often as you can. Use a grid if you need to. I use the 1/3 lines on my phone and on the panel to help me get the drawing right. It's too bright out for me to see in any great detail anything on my phone, but I can at least see where the landmarks fall, like the back of the boat and the front of the boat, the top and bottom of the boat, and put those in and then draw the rest of it freehand. Another good tip for drawing with a paintbrush is to hold the paintbrush well back. Don't choke up far up on the ferrule of the brush. Hold it way back on the handle. It's a little uncomfortable at first, but once you get used to it, it'll give you nice fluid lines. I'm really taking my time with the drawing, adding some darks, erasing out the lights, and even using a paper towel to wipe out some of the lightest lights. I want to get the drawing right. It's so important in a realistic drawing like this, where the perspective, the foreshortening needs to be correct. I also find that value pattern I establish will help me later in the painting. I can just follow it, not in a paint by numbers way, but just to help me stay on track, to keep in mind the value pattern that attracted me in the first place. That was quite a bit of fun, drawing with the wash. I tried to put in a composition and a value map with the wash, but I think this was the most, I don't know how you'd say it, this was the most sketch-like underpainting I've ever done, drawing that boat in with just a couple colors on the white panel. That was a lot of fun, and it reminds me of something Richard Schmid says in his Alla Prima 2 book. Ideally, the underpainting is almost beautiful enough that you could just leave it as is. So if I was to add just a little more background, the trees and a suggestion of the boat behind the boat I'm painting, and play with the value pattern a little bit more, I could create a really beautiful, I think, sepia tone type drawing with the paint. So I really enjoyed that. Hopefully I don't screw it up now as I paint further. Now, as usual, I'll start to mix up the true colors. I'll start with the background sky. First I'll put away the artist turpentine, make sure my palette is nice and clean before I mix the sky. I don't want to get any of the brown color from the palette in the sky. I want it to go down pretty clean, and I'm going to try to remember to paint thin. I think if it would work on any painting, it would be this one, painting nice and thin, letting that underpainting, that drawing show through. Could be pretty interesting. It's pretty rich blue. It's a clear day, so the sky is pretty rich. I think I'll stay with that. I'll go a little richer than normal. Looks like cobalt blue at the top of the sky, down to a yellowish cerulean blue at the bottom. Slightly higher value toward the bottom of the horizon. The trees are all a pretty uniform lime green, a dark shade and a light shade, with hints of warmer orange color in the shadow. I think I'll just leave the panel showing for the trunks of the trees. That's pretty darn close to the color I'm seeing. Then I'll move into the colors of the boat. I have a few colors mixed up. I've got dark cobalt blue, relatively dark, it's really high value, for the top of the sky, and this kind of yellowish blue, really high value for the bottom of the sky. Some shadow green for the background trees, highlight green for the background trees. This is for the ground directly behind the boat. There's a dirt road and some stones and looks like crates, just a jumble back there, so I'll just hint at that right behind the boat. And then I've got dark gray and a light gray tilted a little bit toward alizarin crimson for the boat behind the main boat. Got some colors over here from my previous painting I did at Wilderby Farm this morning. I'm using the same colors to mix the colors for this painting, so I'm happy to dip into these and use them up. I'm using this number 7 Rosemary Evergreen long flat. I like using these long flats, the evergreens, for the sky. Puts in a nice flat sky that still shows a little bit of brush mark. Trying to remember to put the paint on thin, leave some of the underpainting showing. Coming from this direction, hitting the ship. So as I paint the trees, I want to give them a sunny side and a shadow side. Now I'll use this number 4 Series 279 long flat. These are nice for putting in trees. They're a soft natural hair, so they give some kind of chaotic brush strokes that hint at branches and leaves. Here's where that underpainting can really help. The shadows are changing, they're moving, but I have that underpainting to go by to tell me where the shadows were hitting when I first got here, and I can either stay with that or I can change it up if something more interesting happens. But often when you're painting outside, as the sun moves across the sky, you'll lose your shadow pattern, and that can really jumble the perspective. Now I'll start to mix up the colors for the boat. The light is changing enough now that I want to go pretty quick and just put down color notes. I don't want to chase the light into the sunset. I think it'll change the scene a lot. The foreground won't match the background. So what I see on the sunny side of the boat is a warm white, little cadmium yellow in titanium white. The tarp is almost exactly the same color, except maybe a hint of alizarin crimson added on the sunny side. The shadow side of the boat, where the white of the boat goes into the shadow, it grows from a greenish white to a bluish white, and then on into kind of an indigo. I've got a few more colors mixed up now. I've got the white of the boat and the tarp. I've got the shadow of the boat and the tarp. I've got the darkest tones of the wood. This is the darkest dark here, the shadows in the hull of the boat where the siding has been removed. And I also have a dark green here for the shadows under the boat in the grass. So I'll mix up a little bit of greenish blue, and then as I paint into the shadow, I'll just add a little bit of the lavender pile of paint that I have on my palette there, just to twist it just a little bit indigo, a little bit lavender. Some of the shadows are very warm, so I'll also use a little bit of my gray with some of this grayed down orange white added for a higher value, warmer shadow. The unvarnished wood, or the unstained wood of the boat is just about the same color as the wash that I put down. So I'm going to just leave that for now. I may put a couple touches of burnt sienna with a little bit of orange added in spots where some of the old paint is still a little bit more vibrant, but where it's worn down and weathered, it's really just about the same color as the wash I put down. There's a little bit of grayish wood on the side, especially as it goes toward the back of the boat, that has a touch of blue in it, so I'll just use a little bit of sky color in some gray with a little bit of burnt sienna to note that color. And then the shadow side of the tarp, it's about the same as the shadow side of the white of the boat. And then that green stripe across the brow of the boat, across the top of the cockpit, that's a really unnatural looking green. I may tone that down a bit and just make it a more earthy green with alizarin crimson touches. We'll see. It may go a little more vibrant if it doesn't jump out quite right. The shadows, the deepest, darkest shadows are burnt umber with a little bit of alizarin crimson added. Pretty dark. Well, that was a lot of fun. It was kind of brutal under the sun, but I still really enjoyed it. You know, leaving more of the underpainting showing it's a kind of a chore for me. I have to think about it to do it, but wow, do I like the effect. It really gives the whole of the boat a nice glow. Here's where it ended up. I left most of the hull, the red of the hull is just still that initial wash, trying to leave the drawing intact. There's a couple things that I don't like. I don't like the tail end of the tarp here. That needs to be tidied up so it looks like it's wrapping the back of the boat rather than like flipping out with the wind. I'm not sure about the background trees. They read a little flat, but of course that does kind of push the boat forward, so I'm a little undecided on that. I want to look at it in some studio light and see how it looks. I think this ladder on the side of the boat is a little crude. I don't really read a ladder there, but I didn't want to get out the little rigger and do the fine drawing right now. I can do that later in the studio. I like the color of the foreground grass. I think that matches what I'm seeing here on site pretty well, and it's really loose. I like how it just, the eye doesn't hang there. It's just kind of something interesting that the eye can bounce off of and go back to the shapes in the boat. This tarp may need a little bit of adjustment. It looks a little flat, almost like a sail. I don't want to nitpick it because I do like the initial impression, the rough illusion, especially as you stand back from it. So I'll take it back to the studio before I decide on any big changes. I do like the drawing. I think the drawing is the most successful part of this painting. The ship really seems to come out of the painting, especially when you see it in person. Well, thanks so much for joining me on this one. Had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, I think. It was definitely good practice. I'll take it back to my studio and probably do a little critique and maybe a little bit of touch-up and put it out on my website. If you want to support the channel, please jump over to my website and check out these plein air paintings. I usually sell them at a pretty reasonable price, and it sure helps me when someone buys them. It really makes me happy too when someone likes my art enough that they purchase a painting. I'll see you in the next one.